Hello everybody, Mannix here. Going to be doing a quick little addition to How It Locks, a series where I explain how knife locking mechanisms work. The Cold Steel Ram Safe Lock. This is a lock mechanism designed by Cold Steel. I believe Andrew Demko specifically designed it. It is one of the strongest locking mechanisms in the world. Now, Cold Steel is already known for their Triad lock, which is also one of the strongest locking mechanisms in the world. But this, I would argue, I haven't seen too many head-to-head tests, but I would argue it is a little bit stronger than that, if not just flat out stronger. This is how it works, essentially. So this is kind of a blast from the past. This knife came out around 10 years ago or so, but the idea is because of this one solid piece of metal that the handle is made of, there's no way you could make a lockback style knife like the Triad lock for this. So they came up with this Ram Safe lock right here, which is one long piece of metal. It extends across the entire length of the handle pretty much. It begins here. It's this piece that's stonewashed, as you can see, with the lanyard attached to it. And there's a torsion spring inside of the mechanism. I can't show you it, but there is a spring inside of there, which is constantly putting pressure on this mechanism to move forward, to move this way. So when you release it, there's a lot of pressure on there. It's really a slow knife. I haven't tightened down pretty tight too, but basically it wedges itself in between the spine of the handle and the roof right here, the notch, the cutout you can see right there, of the tang of the blade. Once the space is freed up, it just shoves itself in there, and you have a whole bar taking up the entire length of the tang right here. This whole piece is occupied by that locking mechanism. All that right there. That's a lot of space. So positive force, that is force going on the edge, gets transferred to the very end of the mechanism. Basically, it just gets transferred to that, and then it gets transferred all across this entire bar right here. So you need to smack this extreme. You need so much force in order to somehow disengage, just actually push this back, because that is a lot of metal and a lot of pressure. It's even hard to do it manually, to pull that back. And then the negative force, that's when force goes on the spine of the blade. Basically, that's usually an accident when you smack it against something. The force gets transferred to the bar, which again is wedged in between the tang and the roof of the handle, and then to the steel handle. There's three pieces of metal working together in this small little space right here, and it's this big old bar with a lot of pressure being forced on it. It's just extremely strong. Extremely strong locking mechanism. Now, why they don't have more knives like this, why more knives do not use the Ram Safe lock, well, there are disadvantages to it. One thing is safety. If you use common sense and you don't slip or anything, you'll be fine, but it clamps down on you. It snaps pretty. It's not like a huge snap, but it does snap. You would get cut pretty bad if your fingers happen to be in there, because again, there's so much pressure because of the torsion spring on there. It's also very slow. You cannot, for the love of God, you cannot flick this thing open. It must be opened conventionally. However, if you pull on the lanyard right here and open it, that would relieve some of the pressure manually, and then that makes it a little bit easier to open up. Actually makes it very easy to open up. Another downside is, since this knife happens to be all made of metal, it's slick. So if your hands are starting to sweat, like mine are actually sweating right now, I'm starting to slip, trying to close this knife, just showing you in this video. That could be another way it could cut you. So be very careful, wear gloves if you're going to use this knife. You can, it is serrated right here, so you can disengage it without the lanyard, but don't even try it. It is so painful. I'm not even going to... No, I can't. You technically can. Eventually, this is pretty new. I haven't used this knife that much yet, so that could be part of it. Over time, it might loosen up on you. As a last ditch, you can use your fingers technically, but this get a lanyard on there. It comes with a lanyard, so basically, this is one of the strongest locking mechanisms in the world. It is single-handled, and minus the pantographic style knife and the balisong. Those are two-handled knives. For a single-handled knife, this is probably the strongest locking mechanism that exists, just because there's so much force on there. There's videos of people batoning with these things. I don't think you can even successfully baton with a Triad lock. I think eventually those things may fail on you, but this just has so much more force, and it is slower. That is a disadvantage, but it is a lot more powerful. So what is the point of the locking mechanism? Basically, if you want a bushcraft knife, you want a knife that you can baton with and do really hard woods work with, but you want it to also fit in your pocket, you don't want to carry a sheath or anything, this is good for that. However, I would just recommend getting a fixed blade anyway, because technically it's still a locking mechanism. Back in the day, these would fail. Sometimes people would show footage of the locking mechanism goofing up, but that was back in the day. Cold Steel updated it since then, and since that moment I have not seen it fail. Basically just really strong, interesting, slow, but awesome locking mechanism.